Welcome back to the channel. RacerX here, and I am actually at a very cool dealership today called Hot Rides. I've actually never filmed with them before. They are in Texas, and they're like a gold mine. If you like cars with aftermarket parts on them, performance, all sorts of fun mods, this is a very cool dealership. They've got literally hundreds of cars here, and almost all of them are modified. Very neat machines. I'm going to take you inside and show you. If you're new to my channel, please do me a big gigantic favor. Please hit subscribe. Super windy, so I'm going to go tuck in out of the wind, and off we go.
T-minus 15 seconds.
Let's step into Hot Rides, their showroom in here. I'm gonna show you a little bit about this place. Very cool. You can see they've got some very unique stuff. They've got a Gen 4 Viper here. That is actually a Yenko Camaro, which I'm a huge fan. That makes 1,100 horsepower. They've got a little Civic Type R right here. And through these doors, it's like a Disneyland if you're a car guy. And as we step into here, check out the showroom. They're actually moving some cars around for me right now. It might get a little bit loud, but just take a look at the inventory these guys keep on hand. It goes all the way back. All these beautiful modded cars. Just perfect example, that is a 350R right there. Super hard car to find. You've got a modified ZL1 1LE that makes over 800 horsepower to the wheel right over here. A manual, very cool car. A million Mustangs, Camaros in here. You got Z06 Corvettes. I mean, it's just a smorgasbord of awesomeness in here. I don't know what else to say about it. You can see I think they've got 8 GT350s, just that. So it's very, very cool. You can see GTRs over here. You've got another 350, and then you've got some import stuff over here too. So if you're an import guy, they've got that for you here. Lines and lines of just modified Mustangs. So a very neat place. For somebody like me, I absolutely love it. They also have red and blue ZL1s right here. Both of these two cars are gorgeous. If you're a Mopar person, there's an RT. I've got a Hellcat all the way back here. You can see we've got Cadillac CTS-Vs, all sorts of fun stuff. But today is a little bit different type of deal. We're gonna compare some stuff on 2 Mustangs. So here are the cars that I wanted to compare for you today. Both of these are Mustangs. They actually look very similar. One is blue, one is red, of course, but very different setups indeed on these 2 cars. So as we know, this car here, that is my Hellion Twin Turbo Mustang GT. And then of course, this car, the blue car, that is actually a supercharged, a whippled Mustang GT. So the 2 cars, while they started life as really the exact same thing, basically the exact same trim, everything on the car is basically the same. They are very different in setup. So let's jump into the comparison between these 2. So if you're somebody that has a Mustang GT and you want to add big power to your car, really these are the 2 traditional ways that most people do it. Yes, you can go naturally aspirated, and these cars actually do very nicely keeping them naturally aspirated. See, like an E85 tune and some long tube stuff like that. These cars are actually quite formidable, but you really can pour the coals to these cars once you start boosting them. So here, this of course, my Hellion Twin Turbo Mustang GT with twin undermount 64s. This car was actually engineered to look bone stock. I mean, everything about this thing just screams bone stock, but just trust me, there is nothing bone stock about this thing. It is very fast. This car is actually capable of making huge horsepower. I actually have it turned down, and this car still very easily makes over 900 to the wheel, and it's capable with a different engine, obviously with the race engine, and then obviously a built-up transmission. This car could probably easily make 13 to 1400 horsepower. The sky is kind of the limit with this. And then over here, a completely different setup altogether. That is a Whipple supercharger sitting right on top of this fantastic Coyote engine. And the Coyotes just love boost. So if you're a Mustang guy, you got to know, I mean, so many people out there love boosting their Coyotes because this engine just really does well with boost. I mean, that's why it's such a popular mod. But look at the beautiful Whipple on top of this, a 3-liter Whipple on top. Now this car is actually on 93, unlike mine, which is actually on E85. So this car makes somewhere around 700 wheel horsepower, which is still an awful lot. And then of course, if you went over to E, my guess would be it could probably make closer to 800 horsepower, even with this pulley setting on there. And then of course, you can pulley it down and make even more power. So just very different in the way these 2 cars make their power. So really the question of the day is, well, which one is actually better? It really just depends on who you ask. It's purely subjective because both cars, both types of setups here have their merits. So I want to go ahead and give you the pros of both. Now, one of the best things about supercharging your Coyote engine is the fact that it really kind of does away with one of the biggest flaws of the Coyote. And I don't know if you really want to call it a flaw. I kind of see it as something that's a little bit of a drawback, and that's just the low end torque of this. It's 5 liters, so it's not like a 6.4 liter Hemi in the way it makes torque. So down low, these cars are just a little bit sluggish in my mind. But this monster actually fixes all of that. With a 3 liter supercharger sitting on top of your Coyote, this thing actually comes off the line extremely hard, and it makes power in a very neat way. I mean, it's so gratifying. You don't need miles and miles of highway to have a lot of fun with a supercharged car like this. Now, when you jump over to a twin turbo setup, completely different story. This one, it is a little bit sluggish off the line, unless of course you like activate a 2-step at the drag strip, or you know, you put a different converter in it, all that kind of stuff. This one is really made to scream up high. This thing really shines on the highway and makes big mile an hour, but it's just down low. It just takes a minute for those turbos to kick in. There's a little bit of turbo lag depending upon what size turbos you go with, and you just have to take into account, if you're trying to race one of these guys with a supercharger on it from a dig, he is definitely going to get out on you, assuming he doesn't spin, he or she. But this particular car, like I said, you do not want to match up with a twin turbo Coyote. If you're a supercharged Coyote on the highway, typically these things really do eat on the big end. Now, the next point I want to make about the supercharger is simply the ease of installation. This simply is an easier thing to install than a twin turbo kit. Not to say that the install is something you can do in just a couple of hours, but the ease of installation on a supercharger is easier than it is with twin turbos. There's just less piping, all that kind of stuff. Even if you go with a centrifugal force supercharger, I mean, they're all belt driven, and they're just easier and cheaper to install than a twin turbo kit. There were a lot of hours put into this particular car, and mind you, this is simply a bolt-on kit, but there's a lot of piping and stuff that goes onto the bottom of these cars. Of course, a twin turbo works off your exhaust gases, so very different setup indeed, but definitely cheaper to install a supercharger. So then that begs the next question, right? If it gives you a lot more low-end torque, it makes the car just a ton of fun to drive, it's easier and cheaper to install, why even bother with a twin turbo? Well, I'll give you several reasons. One, twin turbos are actually a lot more efficient than a supercharger is. A supercharger, of course, is belt driven, as I mentioned. This works off your exhaust gases, and it's just a very efficient way to make power. As a matter of fact, these twin 64s on this car actually make about 41 horsepower per pound of boost, all the way up through 12 pounds. So that is a very, very efficient way to make power. And the two cars, they even sound different. It's just amazing. Another great thing about the twin turbo system, well, actually, let me jump inside and I'll show you. So unlike a supercharger, I have the ability to simply turn the turbos up or down with just the touch of a button. For example, my base setting on this car is somewhere around 660 to the wheel. All I have to do is push this button one time and put it on setting 2. Now it's 800 wheel. Now we're at about, what, 860? Then we jump up to about 900 wheel. And however you want to configure this, you can turn the turbos up or down. It's such a fantastic way to make power. So if you're just running around on the street, everyday driving, you turn it all the way down. You go to the track, you could turn it up basically as high as you want. And mind you, these turbos have a lot more top end potential on them. I mean, this thing, well, as I mentioned, could make 13 or 1400 horsepower. So a very, very cool system indeed. So now I'm actually aboard the Supercharged Mustang GT with a 3-liter Whipple on it. And I mean, it feels basically identical to the inside of my car. This one does have the leather seats. Mine's got those base cloth seats. But at the end of the day, it feels exactly the same with one key difference. This car is a 6-speed manual versus my 10-speed, but I'm not comparing the actual speeds of the cars today. I'm actually just comparing the driving experience. So I'm gonna get this thing down the road and see how it drives. So after driving this car for a couple of minutes, I will tell you, I know this car has an aftermarket suspension in it, just like mine does, and it is equally as squeaky. That's just part of the deal with these aftermarket cars. It actually absorbs bumps quite nice, but I will tell you, you definitely can feel a difference in the way this car just has that low-end grunt that my car kind of lacks. It's just, it takes a minute for those turbos to get going. This car, there is no waiting on the power. I mean, just listen to it. Oh, jeez. It is, it gets moving quite quickly, and it just makes this car a lot of fun to drive. It sounds great. Listen to that Whipple supercharger and that exhaust go. And yeah, there's no waiting on the power. It just makes you smile. It's just such a fun car to drive. Coming out of the hole in this car, it really does feel, yeah, it really feels a lot different than the other car. The torque, yeah, it definitely makes the torque out of the hole. So this one feels a lot more like an engine that has way more displacement. And of course, that's exactly what it has. It has a positive displacement supercharger, which gives it all of that low-end grunt, and it just makes these cars just so much fun. And I have to admit, the sound that comes out of the back of this car is just fantastic. What a melodious thing coming out of the back of this car. And it's just a completely different sound than what the twin turbo car makes. I mean, you can hear the blower under there whining and making that insane sound. And then of course, you know, it's just when you tip in, it just takes a little bit of throttle, and the car's just gone, and it just doesn't really take any time to react. So I really want to go jump in the twin turbo car now and just give you the vast difference in the way that car drives, just how different it is. Yeah, you just really can't go wrong with one of these superchargers. Oh, good stuff. And now, of course, I am in my twin turbo car. And yeah, this thing does make more power than the other car does. But like I said, it's really more about the comparison of just the way these two cars drive, just how different it is to drive them. And I don't want to kind of misstate things. It's not like this car is super sluggish down low. It's all relative. But if you're used to driving a Hellcat or even a 6.4 Hemi, it does feel like it lacks a little bit of power on the low side. And of course, even with these twin turbos, like I said, when they're not boosting just right off the line, it doesn't really come off that hard. My 60 foots in this car at the track are like 1/8. It's really not very good. Now that will change as I add a like a 2-step, and of course I have a different converter coming from the car. That's a new video coming out. But when I start to really dip into the throttle, this thing really starts to come alive. Now, when I've got the small tires on the back, I always keep this on the lowest boost setting I have, and it still just overwhelms the tires. But I actually have the drag radials out back, which always makes it fun. So I'll hit me about 12 downshifts here, get it to the right power RPM, and it's trying to kick me in the pants, and here comes the boost. It's like loading, and then all hell breaks loose. With a car like this, you really have to make sure that there's a lot of real estate opened up in front of you, because it's like you start going and then all of a sudden the turbos kick in and you just start gobbling up all sorts of road in front of you extremely fast. Almost like you go into a time warp like you see on Star Trek or something. Stuff starts going by at crazy speeds. With a supercharged car, I mean, you can just have a little opening here or there, and you can just kind of dart right in, and it's a lot of usable power down low. Just a big difference between these two setups. Here comes the boost. Oh, geez. Oh my gosh. Listen to those turbos. Man, this thing is a riot. And that is really why this question is so difficult for me to answer. Supercharged versus twin turbo, there really is no right or wrong. It's completely subjective because both cars offer fantastic driving experiences in different ways. Each one has its merits, so you guys just kind of have to make up your own mind which one is really the best.